Hello everyone and welcome back to the last video on preprocessor. In this particular video, we are going to have a look at the last type of preprocessor which I had introduced you in the previous video, what is called as conditional compilation. Now, let us focus and let us recollect ourselves what we have done earlier. One of the most important statement that you have done in your programming, and I am sure majority of you will like it, is printf statement, right? Now, what is the purpose of this printf statement and what actually we have done? Now, printf statements can be inserted code for the purpose of displaying the debug information during the program testing. We can use that like that. Now, once the program is debugged and accepted as working, it is desirable to remove these debug statements, right? Of course, if later an undetected bug appears during the use of the program, right, I would like to put some or all debug statements back in the code to pinpoint and fix the bug. Getting it? Now, one approach to this is to simply comment out the debugging statements or the debug statements. That is, surround them with comment markers so that if they are needed, they can be always uncommented, right? Now, you know how basically a comment statement is written in C in a pair of slash star followed by a couple of comment statements and then terminated by star slash. Now, this is a vast improvement over removing them and later having to type them back actually. But I felt personally that this approach does require, right? I'm sorry, this approach does require going through the entire source file to find all of the debug statements and comment or uncomment them. So basically what I'm trying to say is, instead of doing all these exercises, you use conditional compilation to select particular sections of code to compile while excluding the other sections. Now in C programming, you can instruct the preprocessor whether to include certain chunk of code or not, certain piece of code or not. To do so, conditional directives can be used. Now, what are the uses of this conditional compilation? First, use different code depending on the machine's operating system. Compile the same source file in two different programs. To exclude certain code from the program, but to keep it as reference for the future purpose. Okay, so these are the uses of the conditional compilation. Now, a couple of examples with respect to conditional compilations are the directives, which are #ifdef, #else, and #endif. Now, what are these three directives? These three directives are actually logical preprocessor directives which are used to specify which code will be compiled through the compiler based on defined macros. Right? Let us understand this. Let us look at an example and see how these type of preprocessor directives can be used in C programming language. Okay, so I say hash define, let me say debug as one, that's okay. And then I will say here, I'll say hash if def, I say debug. Okay, hash if def, I say debug, and I say printf debug on. Okay, so I just said printf debug on, and then okay, and then what I can say is I can say hash else, and then I can say debug off. And I say hash and if. Okay, so let us see what is the output of this particular program. So I just get the output as debug on. Right now, how does it works is you have this identifier as debug, right? So line number 2 is actually a macro substitution, and the replacement text is 1. Now, what is conditional compilation here? These things, these directives, hash if def, hash else, and hash end if. These three are actually conditional compilation. Now, basically what happens is, right, in this example, macro debug is defined. Okay, it is defined. So, code written within the hash if def will be executed. Understand? Since identifier debug, or I can say macro debug, is defined, right, any code written inside if def will be executed. Right now, if macro debug was not defined, right, so this what happens, this debug will be replaced by 1, correct? It is a sort of a true, and hence this particular statement will be executed, right? That's what I said. If the code or macro is defined, so code written will be executed. On the other hand, if macro debug was not defined, code written within hash else and end if will be executed, right? So let me see what do you mean by not defined. Now, what is not defined? I can just put this into, comment statement. So it is not defined now. Line number 2, you do not have. So the debug macro is not defined, right? Now let us see what is the implication of that in my program. See, that's what you get is you get debug off because this particular macro is not defined. So that is what I meant to say, that if macro is defined, the code within hash if def will be executed. On the other hand, if macro is not defined, the code within hash else and hash end if, right, that is in between lines 6 to 8, that will be executed. So that is how the conditional compilation works in association with macro substitution. Okay, so these preprocessor directives are much similar to if else statement. Okay, I repeat, these preprocessor directives are much similar to if else statement. This conditional compilation works at compile time and check the macros. Okay, conditional compilation works at compile time and go about checking the macros. But one thing remember, if else statements checks two operands. You recollect? We have seen this, right, in the decision control structures, right? If else structure or statement checks two operands and executes at runtime. So be careful with this fundamental definition, a thin line difference. If else with respect to runtime and conditional compilation with respect to compile time. Okay, so let us see if I have some more program with me. So I have this. So let me just copy the program rather than wasting time in typing it. So this is what I have, and let us directly okay, so let us run the program and let us see what's the output. So compilation error. This is the problem with copying the from the PowerPoint back to the online editor. The double quotes get slightly tilted. Okay, so that's fine. If we are interested in getting the output, we have to get rid of syntax error. But I always love correcting syntax error because earlier also I have told you that committing syntax error is C programmer's birthright. C programmer's birthright. Okay, so let us have a look at the output. So nothing much to explain. So I have macro substitution here. 45 gets replaced in every occurrence of max, and so this is 45 greater than 40, so max is greater than 40. So that is what you get the output here, right? On the other hand, I just make this as 35, right? And I don't need to explain you will get the output as simple as no, max is not greater than 40. Okay, so this is how basically the three directives which are part of conditional compilation works in C. Let me also show you one more code before I wind out this particular topic. Okay, so I have this. So that let me put it here because I had written in the same line in Microsoft in PPT from the space point of view, but that is not a good practice in while coding actually. So this is how it is, right? So I have marks as 65. So this is fine. This is not true. So it will come here. This looks to be true. So let us see what is the output over here. Oh my God. I mean, this is, I think we need to rewrite the online compilers at times. It is irritating, right? So at times, right? It's okay. But nothing like, our favorite Ubuntu compiler, which we used to do in the lab. So nothing like that. So yeah, so here it goes. I get the answer as grade B, right? So suppose if I make this as 75, obviously I'll get grade A, right? So it looks so nice on the marks card to have grade A for all the subjects. But I always keep telling there's no free lunch. Nothing comes free on this earth. So you have to put a lot of efforts. And if you really want to get grade A in your marks card, it's extremely important that you study well and get done all the assessments in a much better fashion. So let's go back to the PPT and so this is what we have already seen, right? And hashif directive is used to check whether the macro name is previously defined or not, right? We have already seen that with the help of examples, right? So nothing new. If it is defined, then statements between if def and else will be executed. That's what I already told you. And these are the some of the examples. This is another example which tells about those three preprocessor directives. So let us move into the almost closing part of this particular topic called as preprocessors. The advantages. The following are actually the advantages of preprocessors. C preprocessor improves the readability of the C program. It makes the C program easy to maintain. And the last one is it makes the C program more portable. So the advantage of using preprocessor is threefold: readability, maintenance, and portability. Also, let us have a look at the disadvantages. The first disadvantage is preprocessor macros don't respect the scope or usage in any way. They can screw up perfectly good code in unexpected and difficult to find situations or ways. And hence, what I recommend is always avoid them unless you have a good, strong reason to use the preprocessor macros. Second, macros are not useful when the function definitions are big and when the function is used many number of times, right? They are not useful when the function definitions are big and when the function is used many number of times. And the third one is there is no type checking, right? Which you used to have it in earlier cases of programming language. In preprocessor, you don't have any type checking. Okay. And the last one is difficult to debug as they cause simple replacement. That is what is macro substitution all about. So, and hence, because of the property of macro substitution, it is difficult to debug. So that's what we have seen, the advantages and disadvantages. Let us move on to the last slide and what is called as conclusion. Now let me conclude this particular topic with 3 points. The first point is preprocessors are an important part of the C program. Without it, we cannot run any program. And for the beginners, for the freshers, you should learn this concept to master C programming, right? Extremely important. Second, preprocessor directives helps us write more efficient programs and more readable programs to some extent. And the last point I want to conclude is the conditional compilation directives also allows us to branch our program output in various ways. right? So that is all about preprocessors. I hope you have understood the concept, right? Try to go through it, once again. Try to code some of the preprocessor, snippets on your own, because what is extremely important is it takes a lot of time for somebody to become a master of C programming, right? And we are just beginners. C programming is never an ending story, right? Every day you keep on doing it. Every day I'll tell you, you keep on learning new things. Okay.